Hey everybody, Lisa McCarthy here. I'm just gonna wait a second here just to make sure that I can get this all hooked up on my computer so I can see any comments as they're coming in. Make sure I'm all muted there. Perfect. So to introduce myself, my name is Lisa McCarthy. I'm a fashion industry coach and the founder of youraddict.com, which is a platform where I share resources for emerging designers to start and grow their clothing line. I'm bringing my corporate experience from 15 years working in the fashion industry to give you little tips, secrets, insider information so that you're not stumbling around in the dark as you're trying to launch your own clothing line. I come on live to Facebook once a week with new tips for you guys, and it's a great opportunity for you to jump on, ask questions in the comments, and really engage and think of me as your personal coach as we're going through this. I also have a private Facebook group if you're interested in joining in that, which has other independent designers as well as other industry professionals in there. So you can just search in Facebook groups for Your Attic, and it's a private group, so you'll have to ask for an invite on there, and I will add you, and there's some great conversation in there as well as support and motivation for other people that are looking to grow their clothing line. So today we're going to be talking all about 5 common mistakes that new designers make when sampling. So as I've gone through making lots and lots of samples, you'll hear in the industry people go back and forth between samples and prototypes. I have overseen easily thousands of prototypes in development, and every season there are always things that seem to catch people off guard that they're not expecting, and similar issues come up season after season. So I really wanted to walk you through some of those most common things so that you know that they're coming and you can be prepared for them, because you're all just looking for your samples to show up in a timely manner, looking beautiful, having high quality, and to not have a bunch of unexpected costs built into them. So I'm going to walk you through. So the first thing, let me just get down to my notes, that I see a lot of designers doing, and this really does come with somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience in the industry, is not using enough visuals. So in corporate fashion, not in so much the scrambly startup fashion, people are very, very meticulous about doing a detailed technical sketch that illustrates your garment in a way that your factory partner can understand. So this is often created in Adobe Illustrator, is kind of the most common program that people use to do those technical drawings. But there are also lots of other ways that you can communicate in a visual form. So first I want to touch on why visual is important. When people are writing, so oftentimes when you're writing to people at a factory, English isn't their first language. So they might not actually even be able to read English. If they can read English, a lot of it ends up to interpretation. So they would have an idea in their mind. So they're trying to draw a picture in their mind based on what you're saying. So the best way to be on the same page is actually to give them a picture of what you want. So if you're not somebody that's skilled with making technical sketches, there are a couple of things that you can do. So one is you can either work with somebody who has a background in that. So there are a lot of freelance technical designers that can support you in doing those technical sketches for you. And I have a whole bunch of friends and colleagues that I know. So if you are looking for somebody, reach out to me and I can hopefully connect you with somebody that can support you with that. And then there are other things that you can do. So if you're doing something that's super basic and the way that you're really elevating it is maybe through a graphic or through a fabrication, and the actual style isn't very complicated, you can also communicate that in a few different visual ways, not just through a technical sketch. So you can also give a hand-drawn sketch. I wouldn't recommend it is the best thing to do, but if you're doing something really basic and you don't have access to somebody to do a technical sketch on the computer for you, you could do a hand-drawn sketch. You could also give detailed photographs. So the way that you can do that is just to really lay it on a table so that they can see what that garment looks like flat, because that's actually what you would be drawing when you're drawing a technical sketch. Another name for it is a flat. So you want to see how that garment looks when it's laying flat on a table. And then you also want to take detailed pictures. So you want to have pictures of not only the front and the back of the garment, but you would also want to have images of any important inside construction, any placement of where you want your labels to go or your buttons to go or any special trims that go on that. You really just don't want to leave anything up to chance. So I can remember when I was doing my final project in design school, I submitted my technical sketches, and I had gone the extra step and learned Illustrator, because when I was going to school, Illustrator wasn't even the tool that people used. We used Carrot CAD, which is like 100 years ago. But I didn't do back sketches. I was like, well, it's obvious. It's just the back of a shirt. And I can remember my teachers giving it to me, because my interpretation of what the back would look like and your interpretation of what the back would look like are completely different. So you want to leave nothing to chance and give them exactly all of the details. So how, is there a seam on the back elbow? Does the hem dip in the back? Does it nip in at the waist? Are there any graphics or any placements on the back? You really want to give them all of the information that you can, and particularly when you get into more technical garments like outerwear, you need to be very specific about how pockets are constructed. If you're putting a flap underneath your zipper, if you're putting a tab on your cuff, what does the construction of that look like? And some of those things are, I've seen in like a first prototype, somebody draw it out to the best of their ability and then also leave a note like, the construction is open for conversation. So if you have a better way of doing this, factory partner, please tell me that and give me that information so you can work back and forth. But you don't want to just leave anything to chance. You want to think through each of these things and then express them in a visual way. I'm just going to take a peek and see if there's one other thing in terms of creating a visual for your factory. The other thing that I've seen that's really, really effective is to send a taped garment. So if you've bought a sample that's similar to what you would like, except for there are a few things that you want to change, I've seen it vary. A lot of designers effectively get you can get really skinny kind of 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch tape, and then actually use that to call out on your style where your new seam lines are going to be. So if you want to move the princess seams on a dress slightly in or slightly out, really tape out what that's going to look like so that your factory isn't just guessing what that shift looks like. You can give them a real garment with real seams on it, even though they're done in tape, and then send them that sample so that they understand exactly what you're looking like. So number one on things to be careful about is being really, really visual when you're talking to your sampling partner. Number two on the list is not having all of your materials ready as you're going into the sampling process. So like thinking through all of the construction details in your garment, you're also responsible for thinking about all of the materials that go into your garment. So I liken this a little bit to when I was planning for my wedding and I was trying to talk to my husband about what color napkins we need. And he was like, I don't care, like it doesn't matter. And I was like, well, you might not care, but somebody has to think about it or else they won't be there. So even if we just decide white, that's fine, but we have to make a decision or else it's just not going to get covered. So the same thing happens when you're thinking about all of the materials within your garment. The obvious ones that designers always think about are what are the fabrics that you're using, what zipper are you using, what buttons are you using, but you need to go another layer deeper and think about is there a special elastic that you're using? So what's the elastic that you're putting into your waistband? Particularly in something like athletic apparel, or in swimwear, the elastic quality that you're using is hugely important to how that garment's going to fit. So you really want to think through exactly what that is. Look at samples, make sure you're picking the right one. You're also going to need to think about your thread. What's the thread that works best with the fabrics that you're using? And to get that information, you can work with different thread suppliers, and they can share with you out of their full range of threads what will work with the type of fabric that you're using. The two big guys for threads are A&E and falling out of my head, and I will leave it in the notes on my blog. And then the third thing that people often forget about is interfacing. So if you are doing a shirt, like a structured button-up shirt, what's the quality of interfacing that you want to be putting into the cuffs and into the collar? I have seen this click on that. I've seen that left up to chance a lot of times, and seen the cheapest quality come back and you have super floppy collars and it just does not give you the same look. That's something that you might not know until you reach out to your factory partner and are working with them directly, and you can maybe send them a shirt that you like or something that you like and say, I want it to show up like this, and they can find you something similar. So just knowing that you have to make that decision is the first step to finding the right thing. But what can really delay you in the sampling process is having all of those components at your sample house or at your factory before they start making the sample. So I have seen designers really try and rush things and say, hey, I'm gonna get you the fabric first. Can you just start cutting it and have it ready? The zipper's not gonna be there until next week, and your factory's not gonna do that. They're gonna wait until all of your materials are sitting there. They know exactly what to do with them before they start doing any work on your sample. It's definitely to your benefit that they don't kind of have pieces of this and a piece of that all over the place from a bunch of different brands. They want to have everything all together, super organized and super clear before they start working on it, so that they don't end up mixing things together or starting something and then realizing that they can't finish and having to go back to it later. So really make sure that all of your materials are there, and you're clear on what those are, or else your factory is not going to get started. The other thing that I've noticed holding up from a material standpoint is just how long it can take to order different types of materials and get them to your factories. So as you're going through the material sourcing process, be sure that you're asking your material suppliers what their lead time is. So first of all, whether or not it's something that they hold in stock, so they just have sitting on their shelves and they can pull yardage for you and send it directly to your factory, or if it is something that they have to make up custom for you because it's not something that they generally stock, how long does it take to make that sample yardage? So I know even working for a large organization, this was something that really held us up was, oh great, I want to get a sample made in this, and it takes 60 days for them to actually make the fabric, then another week for it to get to the factory. So you're looking at a couple of months, even though I made the decision today before my materials are in my factory. So as a smaller supplier, you're probably going to be working with more people that have stock on hand that you're pulling off the shelves, but be clear with them that stock on hand means you actually have it sitting there and it's not something you usually have sitting around and you're currently out of stock and need to make more of, because that can really delay the process. Then also think about all of the other components. So the zipper, can you get a piece of that sent over from YKK if it's a really important, specifically that it's this zipper? Sometimes you can sub those things out for sampling and just use something that's really similar, but make sure that you're walking through and thinking about every component and making sure that you're ordering it and getting it sent to your factory for them to use. Number 3 on the list of common mistakes that new designers make is not being clear on how the style should fit compared to your standard body measurements. So I know some of these questions have come up in the Facebook group around where to get standard body measurements, and then how you communicate your measurements to your factory. So the way that it's traditionally done is in something called a spec sheet, where you would write out for your base size. So usually a base size is like a size medium or a size 6 or a size 8. And that's the size that you grade from. So you get larger from there and also smaller from there. But for that base size, my base size customer has a standard 27-inch waist, I'm just making this up, and a 34-inch bust. So she'll have all of these standard measurements, and that's what your customer is. Your style and your spec sheet will call out what your garment should have. So unless you're making something that's super fitting to the body, like a leotard or something like that, you're not going to be doing exactly the same body measurements as your standard spec measurements for your customer. You're going to have to build in things like ease, volume if it's something that's bigger, and depending on what type of fabric you're using, you're going to need to build in more or less ease and give different measurements so that your factory knows how to make your pattern so that it fits your body properly. So one thing that I consistently saw with designers is before they sent out their style, they weren't totally clear on how they wanted it to fit. They knew that they wanted a t-shirt, but was it a really boxy fit that had like 4 inches of ease in it, or was it a slim fitting one that maybe only had like a 1/2 inch ease at the waist? That's something you want to be so clear about beforehand so that that first sample is really driving you towards what you want your end product to look like. If that's something that you're working through in the sampling process, it's just going to cost you a lot more time and a lot more money, because you're going to order your first sample and be like, oh, you know what, that's really boxy. I guess I didn't really want boxy. Let me take it in by a little bit. And then you'll tweak each of those measurements as you go through and make each sample. And again, that's just wasted time and wasted money. Being super clear upfront about what you want is going to help you get to your end goal quicker. And then one way to do this is to look at other styles within the market. So do you have a shirt that fits similar? Have you seen another shirt that looks similar? Or are you really just starting from scratch and saying, I want it to be like this and not like this? So I need to build in the extra 3 inches in length to my shirt that I'm not seeing in the market, and that's what I'm solving for. So just be super clear on how you want that to actually fit the body as you're going out to your factories. One place that is kind of my go-to for where to get standard body measurements is Handdrawn. I will link them in the blog post, and I'll also drop the link in the comments to this after I jump off the Facebook Live. You can just get their standard body measurements for a bunch of different global markets, knowing that people's bodies are different kind of around the world. So you can get standard North American, standard US. I think there's a European body measurement, and I think there's some Asian body measurements as well if you're looking for the basic standard body, and then you'll be building your product based off of that. As you move on and get a little bit bigger, you might even want to order like a dress form that is your perfect body measurement, because that can help you while you're doing your fittings. They're pretty pricey. I'll link that also in my notes so that you can check that out. If it is something that you really want to focus on fit, I would recommend that that's something that you're purchasing as you started to bring in some money and you're looking where to reinvest in your business. That's a great place to reinvest. So that is looking at making sure that you're really clear on how your product is going to fit. Number 4 common mistake that new designers make when sampling is not factoring in their shipping costs for everything. So I know a lot of startup designers have been looking at where's the cheapest place that I can get my sample made. And when they're thinking about that, they're thinking about, oh, they said that they can make a sample for me for like $150. And then the reality of it is, oh, wait a second, the sampling cost is not just that factory saying they're going to make my sample. It's also ordering all of my materials, having all of those materials shipped to my factory, having my factory ship those samples to me for review if they're not local, having me send to the factory any of those taped up samples that I have, or any additional information that they need that we're actually sending back and forth through FedEx or through Canada Post or whatever. Just make sure that you're taking that into account. This is why I oftentimes say, as you're going through sampling, it's really great if you're not going directly to your factory that's going to be doing your production, because maybe you're not that far along yet, is to work with somebody that's sampling in your local area. So you could be working with either like a seamstress that can be turning samples for you really close and helping you work through those first 1 or 2 iterations of your prototype. Or you could be working with a traditional sampling house that is set up with a bunch of machinery, with experts that can help you with your technical sketches, that can help you with the grading as you get farther along. If you are working with somebody like that, best to go with somebody that's local so that you can get materials to them easily. You can pop over there and pick up your samples. and not have to pay all of those additional costs of shipping stuff back and forth. And I guess I should say it's not best to go with that, but just consider that as part of the price of doing business. Is if you're picking somebody that you're going to have to ship everything to, and those shipping costs are going to cost you a couple $100 extra, don't think that person's saving you money, that you can get your sample for a little bit cheaper. You might be better off finding somebody a little more expensive, a little bit closer to you, to save on all of those shipping costs during your prototyping. And then the fifth thing that I'm going to go over, that's the fifth common mistake that new designers make when sampling, is not factoring in how long it actually takes to nail your prototype. So to get something that you're really excited about and that you can actually go into production with. So the sampling process, I have seen, I don't think I've ever seen anything go from first sample to approved, like ever in my life, which says something. But I would say common is like 2 or 3 samples before you get to your approved sample that you would actually be comfortable going into production with. So just keep that in mind, that it is going to take a couple of turns to get that sample right to exactly what you want. You're going to be looking at things like your construction, like your fit. Does it have the right details? Is the quality executing the way that you want it to? I would actually really encourage that. Quality is a huge thing to look at during the development process, so that when you say at the end of the day, this is the sample that I love and I'm going into production with, it is truly what you want to be delivering to your guest. You don't want like a crappy version of something that you're like, oh, but I'm going to get somebody to do it nicer. Like, no, you want your final prototype to be the best representation of what your product is going to be. So it may take 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 samples to get there. And the more complicated your product is, the more turns that's going to take to get there. Once the samples are made, your factory is going to be sending it to you. You're going to be doing comments. You're going to be sending those comments back to them. They're going to be making changes. So to the pattern, they're going to have to recut, and then they're going to go back into making a new sample. So when you think about it, from the time that they have everything in house and they're ready to go, it can take up to 2 weeks for them to turn the sample. And it's not that it actually takes them 2 weeks to sit and sew it, but they're looking at slotting you in with all of the other stuff that they have going on. So they generally will say, oh, we'll get it done for you within that next 2 weeks. Then it's shipping to you. That could be another week. Then you're making comments and sending that feedback to them. That could be another week. And then they're going back into another 2 weeks of prototype. So for each prototype, you're probably looking at about a month of time. So if you're getting up to 2, 3, 4 prototypes, you could be looking at a few months just through that prototyping process. So just be aware of that as you're going in, and when you're thinking about how long it's going to take and when you actually want to be able to go into your production order, don't underestimate how long it can take to do your prototyping at the beginning, and just be set up for success to know that you're probably not going to be able to go live in 3 weeks if you haven't even seen a sample yet. I'm just going to take a peek down here and see if there's anything else. No, I think that that's it. Really just, it can take a super long time to get a perfect garment. And that is one thing that I consistently hear, is that people wish that they spent a little bit more time up front in the prototyping, making sure that they're getting a great sample and not just jumping into production. So it is a really important place to spend your time. And there are a lot of other things that you can be doing to build up your business as you're prototyping. So don't think that your sample's working on it and your new business is kind of dead and on hold for 2 weeks. That's a perfect time for you to start up working on your customer engagement, building out your branding, getting your website set up, starting to think about how you're going to speak to your customer and really starting to engage with her, setting up your mailing list. So there are a lot of things that you can be doing to get ready for your launch before those prototypes are ready and before you start actually taking samples of your product to get up onto the website. So that's everything that I have for you today. I will go back and throw those links back to Elvenon in the comments so that you guys can check out their standard measurements. And I will also throw in those thread resources that I was mentioning. It's best to be working with a thread specialist to be figuring out exactly what type of thread is going to work best for your garments. So if you guys have any other questions, feel free to throw them in the comments or jump over into the Facebook group, and I would be happy to answer them. And we'll be back at it with more content for you guys next week in our live video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.